We have spent a lot of bandwidth on this program, carving out the place of this team, that being the Arizona Cardinals, should be adding players to this roster. They should be eagerly attacking the trade market to get help to this team. And I say help because I don't want to narrowly focus Monty Ossenfort's approach to just one position. There is one position, you're thinking it, I'm thinking it, I've talked about it, you've talked about it, that is a glaring omission on this team right now. And that's where we're going to focus this segment. But it's important to note that there are other things that this team could add that would make them better. And I'm not going to be the guy that if Monty Ossenfort makes a trade for another position and it's a player that can help this team win, to be like, well, you didn't get a pass rusher, so what do you do? That's not what we're going to do here. We are going to tip the cap to an organization that is supporting its players, supporting its coaches. But let's go to the position that we're all talking about, the one that you're thinking about, that I'm thinking about, and let's discuss the names, because I think it's easy to be in front of this microphone and say, go get a pass rusher. I think it's easy to say, you got to make a trade. You have to add to this team. It takes two to tango. There need to be players out there that fit what you're looking for. You could need a corner, and there could be no corners available that are better than the corners you have. You could need a wide receiver and not like any of the wide receiver options. I mean, it takes two to tango. Now, when it comes to this pass rush group, there are categories. There are groups that I think certain players fall into. I think there are this is a group of players that we've talked about, and there's kind of a subcategory in this group, but I've got Myles Garrett and Max Crosby as the known names that we've talked about. I've talked about them. They're the hot names on any trade rumor story that you see out there, any top 25 list of players to get traded before they're there. Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, they're mentioned. I think it is unlikely that both of those guys get moved. You should still ask. You should still make the effort and make the phone call. You should very much force them to tell you no. So I have them in the known names that we've talked about. I'm going to add another name to that group of Myles Garrett and Max Crosby. We haven't talked a lot about this player. I don't know if we've talked about this player at all. And I have this player under the category of probably not happening, but you could ask anyway. And this is a different approach to addressing the Cardinals' issues defensively, because this is not a Myles Garrett or a Max Crosby. This is not one of the other pass rushers that we're going to talk about. But would the Tennessee Titans, if they were overwhelmed with the draft compensation, trade 27-year-old Jeffrey Simmons? Again, not an outside pass rusher, an interior player, a defensive tackle, but one of the best interior players in the game, is only 27 years old. We know this team has had injury issues at that spot, underperformance at that spot. So you trade for Jeffrey Simmons, you put him in the middle. That helps you in your attack against the run. That's a game wrecker in the middle of the defense that can open things up for the guys on the outside. It could impact everything all in one fell swoop. That's a different way to approach it. So like I said, it doesn't have to be a traditional pass rusher for this to be a trade deadline that Monty Ossenfort can win. I don't think we're at a stage right now where the Titans would do that. That feels more like a offseason conversation, but it's worth the ask. So Garrett, Crosby, Jeffrey Simmons, I think those three players are sexy names to talk about. They are popular names to talk about. They are superstar players to talk about. It's understandable why they're the names that constantly come up. They're the names people know. They're the best players at their respective position. They would fetch large hauls. I get it. We've talked about Crosby and Garrett a lot on this show, and I've advocated for going out and getting those guys. It just doesn't feel like those guys are going to move. So I think the next two groups are players that are absolutely on the table to be moved. And there are two groups here. There is a group of pass rushers that are on teams that are underperforming or maybe out of it or are carrying big salaries, but they're under control beyond 2024. So you're not just getting a short-term solution. You're getting help in 2024. Some of these guys are under contract through 2025. Some of them are under contract through 2026. So you have multiple years of control. With some of these guys, you're going to probably have to work out some long-term contract extensions beyond what they have. So you have to do a short-term extension with them, but they are under team control beyond 2024. They are players that help you in this year, but also in year 3 of this process. And then there's the group of one-year rental players that would just be short-term Band-Aid. You might trade for one of these players and immediately offer them a contract extension if you like them to just keep them in the building, but they are on expiring deals and they would be right now short-term solutions. So let's start with the short-term solutions. These would be the rental players. These would be the guys you would bring in, and if you didn't sign them to a long-term deal after trading for them, then they would just be one-year mercenaries for you to try to help this team win football games. Again, I don't think that's what Monty Ossenfort and co are going to do here. If they traded for one of the names or two of the names I'm going to mention here, I think they would come with some extensions, maybe 1 or 2 year deals to create a window. But let's start with Chase Young down in New Orleans. Here's a guy who signed a 1-year deal there last year after fizzling out in Washington. And Chase Young is on a Saints team that is going nowhere fast. This is a Saints team that, with the injuries all across the board, but specifically at quarterback, they have wiped away those first 2 weeks of the year where we thought they were going to be a juggernaut and we thought they were going to be making some noise in the NFC. And so you could trade for Chase Young. The Saints are a team that probably would like any cap flexibility that they could be offered. They would probably relish the idea of acquiring some more draft capital. And if this continues to slide the way it's been sliding, this is a 1-year rental player. Takes 2 to tango. There would be interest in their side because he's a 1-year player. They would lose him at the end of the year, and there would be a reason for the Cardinals to acquire the player. So both sides, it would make sense. So that's how they could match up. It's hard to match up 1-year rentals if they're on teams that are good. So Chase Young being on a team that is bad right now, that opens the door for him to be moved. The same can be said about Azeez Ojulari. And that last name should be familiar because that is the brother of BJ Ojulari, who was already on this Cardinals team. So the Giants lost last night to the Steelers. Didn't play well. The Giants, not Azeez Ojulari, not playing well. Team that's sliding out of control. Don't know their GM and coach are going to be back next year. So you have a GM that doesn't look like he's going to get fired if it starts to slide a little bit. Could be somebody that acquires value for the team. Another guy that makes sense. You could trade for him, give him an extension. Now you got the Ojulari brothers pass rushing. That could be a cool story. Could get both of them even more amped up, get even more out of those guys because they're playing with each other. That stuff matters. You have the Williams brothers in New York, Quincy and Quinnen, and those two guys are elevating each other because their brothers playing together and they're having a blast. So it's something to think about. One more name here for the 1-year rentals, and then we'll get to the names under control beyond this year in the next segment. But Emmanuel Ogbah in Miami. Now, the difference with Ogbah here is he's 30 years old. So this is an older player. I don't know if there's an appetite to trade for Emmanuel Ogbah, who's 30 years old, and then give him an extension for 3 years. And now you're paying a guy till he's 33 with these other options that are on the younger side, are already under team control, or in the case of Young and Ojulari, you could sign them to deals and have them through those peak years. So again, he is an option. Miami's not playing very well. Miami falling out of contention in the AFC East, falling out of contention in the AFC playoff race. Would be interested to see if they would want to get some draft capital back to help them in the offseason, kind of retool on the fly, to try to give it another run in 2025 with a healthy Tua. So that could be an option if Monty Ossenfort wanted to just go the direction of a 1-year rental, not give up a whole lot for a 30-year-old pass rusher, and just give his fans something exciting to talk about and give his team a bit of a jolt, a bit of a boost.